What if the royal family's darkest secret was hidden behind a locked door for 25 years? What if Princess Diana, Princess of Wales's portrait, was secretly removed from history itself? And what if Prince William, Prince of Wales, finally decided he had enough? Inside Windsor Castle, one emotional decision allegedly changed everything overnight. A hidden portrait, a furious confrontation, a silence from King Charles III nobody expected. And standing in the middle of it all was Queen Camilla, completely blindsided. Because after decades in the shadows, Diana had finally come home. Something shocking has just unfolded inside Windsor Castle, something royal commentators have waited more than 25 years to witness. According to explosive palace whispers, Prince William, Prince of Wales, finally reached his breaking point. In a moment that reportedly stunned even senior staff members, he walked directly into the dark storage room where Queen Camilla had allegedly hidden Princess Diana, Princess of Wales's official portrait decades ago. Without hesitation, he pulled the painting from the shadows and carried it back to the place many believed it had always belonged, mounted beside Elizabeth II in the Hall of Matriarchs. The moment Camilla saw Diana's portrait hanging there, witnesses claimed she completely lost control. Palace staff later whispered that they had never seen her so furious, not even during the worst royal crises. She reportedly stormed through the corridors in disbelief before marching straight to King Charles III, demanding that the portrait be removed immediately. But what happened next allegedly turned the palace upside down. Instead of intervening, Charles remained silent. And inside those ancient walls, silence can speak louder than any command ever could. At the center of this storm is a portrait the public rarely ever saw. The painting had been completed during what many considered one of the most extraordinary periods of Diana's life. She was radiant then, admired across the world for her beauty, compassion, vulnerability, and warmth. According to accounts from those present during the unveiling, the artist stepped back after finishing the portrait and quietly told Diana it was complete. She slowly approached the canvas and stood in front of it for a very long time without saying a word. The room reportedly fell silent around her. Then her eyes filled with tears. She refused to let them fall. Instead, Diana gently reached for the artist's hands, held them tightly in hers, and kissed them in gratitude. It was not the reaction of a princess performing for cameras. It was the reaction of a deeply emotional woman overwhelmed by seeing herself portrayed with the kindness and dignity she had always longed to feel inside palace walls. That portrait had originally been intended for the Hall of Matriarchs inside Windsor Castle, a sacred gallery reserved for the most influential women in royal history. Diana had earned her place there long before her death, but fate never allowed her to see it happen. She died before the portrait could ever be displayed. And according to palace rumors, once Camilla finally gained the power to decide what happened to it, she allegedly chose the opposite of what Diana would have wanted. The portrait was removed from public view and carried down into a forgotten storage room deep within the castle. One staff member reportedly offered to help carry it, but Camilla sharply refused, humiliating the employee so severely that nobody else dared speak another word. Witnesses later claimed she personally pushed the portrait into the dusty room herself before shutting the door behind her. And as the lock clicked into place, some swore they saw her. She had allegedly been treated behind closed doors. Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, Diana found herself relentlessly attacked by the British tabloids. Morning after morning, newspapers dissected every detail of her life, her appearance, her emotions, her marriage, and eventually her mental health. Behind palace walls, Diana was fighting battles almost entirely alone. Her marriage to Charles had already fractured beyond repair. In private, he was distant and emotionally cold. In public, he often appeared indifferent toward her pain. At the same time, Diana was secretly suffering from bulimia and protection. When Diana attempted to seek help from palace insiders, she allegedly received almost none. She was told to pull herself together, to remain composed, to keep performing her royal duties no matter how much she was suffering privately. The pressure became unbearable. Eventually, fragments of that pain began slipping into public view, trembling voices during speeches, tears she could not fully suppress, moments of visible fragility captured instantly by photographers. The media turned those moments into ammunition. They called her unstable. They called her hysterical. They described her as too emotional, too fragile, too weak for royal life. And according to persistent stories circulating for years inside aristocratic circles, Camilla and members of her social circle allegedly mocked Diana openly during these periods. Reports claim that on mornings when tabloids published especially cruel stories about Diana's weight, tears, or mental state, Camilla would sit with tea and newspapers while reading the articles aloud to friends over breakfast. According to stories repeated for years among palace insiders, Camilla never corrected anyone who used those names. Diana's height even became a source of humiliation. Standing nearly 5 feet 10 inches tall, she often appeared visibly taller than Charles whenever she wore heels during public engagements. To avoid embarrassing him, Diana reportedly developed the habit of slightly bending her knees before photographs were taken. She would lower one shoulder, shift her posture, and physically shrink herself so Charles would not appear shorter beside her. Yet even that sacrifice became another target for ridicule. Newspapers mocked what they called her royal stoop. Columnists described her as awkward and uncertain inside her own body, and according to long-standing rumors, Camilla privately found the entire situation amusing. One story never officially confirmed, yet never denied claims that during a formal gathering, someone used the nickname Clothes Horse loudly enough for Diana herself to hear. The room reportedly froze. Diana smiled politely and continued walking as though nothing had happened. She had spent years mastering the art of surviving humiliation in public without visibly breaking. But later that night, according to a former staff member, Diana returned to her room, sat silently on the edge of her bed, and did not move for a very long time. The staff member later described that silence as more heartbreaking than tears, because tears would have meant the pain was escaping. Silence meant she was burying it deeper inside herself, exactly as she had done for years. Then came August 1997. Paris became the site of one of the most devastating tragedies in modern history when Diana died in a car crash that shocked the world. But according to accounts that have circulated for decades, while the public was still learning their princess was gone, frantic discussions had already begun inside palace walls about royal jewelry and possessions. A royal aide was reportedly sent to Paris almost immediately to secure items connected to the crown before difficult questions could arise. And while Diana's body still lay in a hospital room, palace life allegedly continued moving forward with chilling efficiency. When Camilla later entered the spaces Diana once occupied, many believe she began systematically erasing traces of her presence. Fresh flowers that Diana loved keeping in her rooms were reportedly removed, personal belongings were boxed away, photographs disappeared from ceremonial areas, and the Hall of Matriarchs, the very place intended for Diana's portrait, remained empty. Meanwhile, young William carried his grief in silence. At just 15 years old, he walked behind his mother's coffin through the streets of London while the entire world watched. But according to close friends, the anger inside him never disappeared. Diana had reportedly spoken honestly to him about the collapse of her marriage. He understood far more than people realized. Years later, one friend claimed William finally confessed what he had buried for so long. He allegedly blamed Camilla for helping destroy his mother emotionally. He believed Diana had been pushed further and further into isolation until she was left vulnerable and alone. Whether those words were ever truly spoken publicly or not, the grief surrounding Diana's death permanently reshaped the royal family. But William was not alone in carrying old wounds. Princess Anne, Princess Royal, reportedly had her own painful history connected to Camilla that stretched back decades before Diana ever entered the picture. Before Camilla married Andrew Parker Bowles, Andrew himself had reportedly been romantically involved with Princess Anne. Marriage had even been discussed at one point, according to royal biographies, but the relationship was discouraged by the royal family, and Anne quietly stepped aside. Shortly afterward, Camilla entered Andrew's life instead. Anne attended their wedding despite the heartbreak it allegedly caused her because senior royals were expected to maintain appearances no matter the emotional cost. Those who knew Anne well claimed she never expressed pain publicly. Instead, she buried it beneath discipline, restraint, and icy composure. Over the decades, rumors persisted that tensions between Anne and Camilla never truly disappeared. Which is why the story surrounding Diana's portrait became even more explosive. According to palace insiders, the night before the portrait was finally restored, William made a private phone call to Anne. He allegedly told her only a few words. "She comes home tomorrow." Anne reportedly answered immediately. "It is long overdue." From that moment forward, everything was set in motion. William had allegedly spent years quietly studying palace traditions, portrait placement protocols, and royal procedures so carefully that nobody could legally challenge the decision afterward. every detail was prepared in silence. On the morning chosen for the installation, Camilla was reportedly scheduled for an engagement away from Windsor, so she would be absent during the process. Inside the sealed hall of matriarchs, only a tiny circle of trusted staff members were allowed entry. Then, after more than 2 decades hidden in darkness, Diana's portrait finally emerged from storage. Witnesses later described the moment as emotional beyond words. The wrapping was carefully removed layer by layer until Diana's face appeared once more in the light, exactly as it had looked decades earlier, graceful, gentle, timeless. One staff member later claimed the atmosphere inside the room changed instantly. Nobody spoke. Princess Anne reportedly stepped forward slowly, placed one hand on the frame, and adjusted it slightly, as though correcting something that had remained wrong for far too many years. Then the portrait was mounted beside Queen Elizabeth herself. One woman who ruled for 70 years. One woman who never received the chance. According to a palace employee present that evening, Anne quietly whispered while staring at the finished wall. "Diana belongs here, she always did." The following morning, Camilla allegedly walked into the corridor, expecting an ordinary day. Instead, she looked up and saw Diana staring back at her from the wall. Witnesses claim she froze completely. For nearly a full minute, she reportedly could not speak at all. Then came the outburst. Staff later described hearing a sound unlike anything they had ever heard from her before, a mixture of fury, disbelief, and panic. She immediately demanded the portrait be removed. The answer was no. She requested an emergency meeting with William. Again, no. She reportedly turned to Charles, expecting him to intervene the way he always had throughout their relationship. But this time, according to the rumors, he stayed silent. And in that silence, something shifted permanently inside the monarchy. For the first time, Camilla allegedly realized she no longer controlled the narrative. William had already secured every legal and ceremonial detail necessary to ensure Diana's portrait could never quietly disappear again. The institution itself had accepted her place in royal history permanently. Then, according to palace gossip, Princess Anne entered the room and delivered 5 cold words that ended the argument forever. "It is what Diana deserved." Anne reportedly turned and walked away without waiting for a response. And just like that, after 25 years of silence, Princess Diana finally returned to the place many believe she should have occupied all along, beside Queen Elizabeth, forever woven into the emotional heart of the modern monarchy. Do you think Diana's portrait always deserved a place beside Elizabeth II? Was this finally Prince William protecting his mother's legacy? Or is this just another chapter in the royal family's never-ending drama? Comment your thoughts below, because this story has divided royal fans around the world. And if you want more emotional royal stories, hidden palace secrets, and untold celebrity drama, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Because the next royal revelation might be even bigger than this one.